Okay, remember that they are changing my voice. This is part two on the issue of appreciation, right? A synonym for appreciate is sense, right? To sense. To appreciate something, to sense something. A great example that I'm willing to debate about any time is the fact that when I was 17 years old, now keep in mind this is going to be a controversial idea. Hear me out, please. Again, when I was 17 years old, that I needed an attractive and very mature 25-year-old female or so who was gorgeous, and I needed to live in a place where it was legal, right? Hopefully, or at least the ability to get away with it. Because if the law is not fair, I do believe that people within reason should break it. Like the civil rights movement, right? Anyway, so women my age or females my age back in high school, they were very immature. They're more mature. They were more mature then than teenagers are now, but they were very immature. They were not ready for somebody who was like a 25-year-old man or 30-year-old man at 17 years old. They edited my old pictures, but you could see it in the original picture. I had a very intense look in my eye at that time. That was the most intense look in anyone's eye I've seen in any picture in real life ever. It was extremely intense. It was a certain masculine intensity that was like unmatched in human history. And I'm not saying this to, massage my ego or something. You have to understand that to understand why I'm right. Now, some of you are foolish enough to think that I'm wrong. Now, bear with me. There's a reason why a developmental disorder is called that. Development, right? How fast are you developing? What's stunting your growth? Okay? And I'm not saying that everyone with a developmental disorder is immature for their age, but certainly quite often they are. Look at people who are mildly retarded. Look at people with autism. Look at people with various developmental mental disorders. And you'll see that I'm right. That's a general rule of thumb. I happened to date a female when I was in my 30s. She was in her 30s, who was very intelligent, who had cerebral palsy. And that's a story for another day. Shout out to her and her family and so on and so forth. To understand why I'm right, you first need a point of reference for what a developed brain is, right? And I'm not going to show you brain scans or something or weigh human brains. That's not how you figure that out. I'm going to go ahead and assert what must be true, and that is that my brain is the pinnacle of perfection when it comes to development. But it's also relative to where we are now. In other words, if the world was worth reproducing in, and I had offspring and they scrambled to one up, their old man, to one up me, that their brains would be a better example. You see what I'm saying? But perhaps in some ways more importantly, if the vast majority of the human race, right, of the entire human race, scrambled to do God's work for thousands of years leading up to this, the gap between my brain and my development would be less dramatic. When we're talking about the gap between me and them. Their brains develop more slowly, and your brain's, kind of determine to a large degree how you look, right? They trigger, your genes and what have you. They distribute resources. Your brain helps determine whether you look sick or not, what have you. Whether you look handsome and healthy or sickly and ugly, it's almost that simple. So when we look at people and we look at the superficial idea of age. Now keep in mind, I do not believe that anyone should reproduce and that anyone should even have sex when they're outside the divine order. So I'm not arguing for the age limit, to magically be removed. In terms of 16-year-old in some state is the age of consent, and 18-year-olds, 18 is the age of consent in, say, California. I'm not arguing for that to be removed. Okay? But what I am saying is that in my lifetime, And again, I have never seen a 17-year-old guy who was even anywhere near comparable to me when I was 17. I wasn't the biggest or something, but you could tell I had a certain intensity, a certain masculine intensity. Right? You could be a big, fluffy kind of, Gabriel Iglesias or whatever that guy's name, that comedian. You could be a big, fluffy, fat bastard from Austin Powers. It doesn't mean you're more masculine than someone else. You could be a muscle. A lot of these guys, they take steroids. They say their penis shrinks. I don't care about how big their penis is. Okay. You could be a huge muscle head, but that doesn't mean you're more masculine than someone who's much smaller than you are, and weighs much less. It was a certain masculine intensity that comes with a certain intense desire for intimacy, including making love, including cuddling and all this stuff, and caresses and all this stuff, and being in the presence of a beautiful woman. I needed all that stuff to the extreme in large doses at 17 years old. I'll debate the psychologists who think otherwise. I'll debate Buddhists who might think otherwise, who think the answer is to meditate. I'll debate anyone on this topic at any time. They're wrong, I'm right. One size does not fit all. There isn't one model for a 16 or 17-year-old that goes across the board. There is no such thing as that. Some 16-year-olds are like, 7 feet tall historically or something. They're way up there. Some are under 5 feet tall. Some are big and strong. Some are small and thin. Some are small with a high sex drive. Some are big with a low sex drive. There's no one model that fits all. Some are very insightful. Some are dumb their whole life. So to chop it up to, but he's 17, is social norm fanaticism. It is a pathetic argument. My arguments are logical. They're scientific. They're irrefutable. To try to combat that with social norms and people's petty opinions and feelings is very sick. Very sick. In the Bible, for example, did Christ as a character in the story say, well, just because it's wise and it's logical doesn't mean we should, obviously, if he said that it doesn't mean that you should do it, it would be a ridiculous statement. If it is wise, Proverbs 8, you should do that and not the unwise thing. Folly is an unruly woman, Proverbs 9. So it is very sad when all these church-going people, you have a government that's mostly red because of so-called Christians, really hypocrites that claim to be Christians, and then they turn around and say, with their white social norms that are conservative heavy, they argue that that's preposterous, is what you would expect. That's preposterous. That they think that a 17-year-old who's developed so rapidly and intensely, who's more mature and more manly than them when they're 40 years old, 30 years old, 25. That it's out of the realm of possibility that it would be a good idea for that guy to have a 25-year-old girlfriend. It's just sheer ignorance. Sheer fucking ignorance. Just sheer inbreeding or something. It's just sheer lack of thinking. Just sheer white supremacy. Because it goes back to white social norms. Now, we need to make some distinctions here, and the distinctions piss me off. First of all, if Schmiegel thinks that he should have the most hot chick that ever lived, and that he has some kind of complex, that makes it so he's miserable without her, should she be forced to date him? No. Should she be convinced to date him? No. Because if you're not righteous, why would you be rewarded? Especially with women. That is insane. You see in the Bible in Revelation 19, Christ is rewarded with what is described as the bride coming down from heaven, the spirit of a receptive city. But you can also see it as a woman. If in the Bible it said that God made Christ a beautiful woman and she came down from heaven, how many of you would say, hey, that's not fair? No, that is fair. But if it was Schmiegel rewarded with the ideal woman, how many of you wouldn't know that's fucking retarded? And so it is with a greedy, racist, white Jew, LGBT, token minority thug with no higher cause, rocker with no, what have you. Anybody who's not righteous. That's dumber than hell. You think these people should be able to leverage your money and your network and science to confuse people about that? That's sick. That is sick, 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 sick. That's pedophile-like sick. You see these females these days, right? Who are having sex with kids and they have the brain of they're like an educated little kid. They were educated enough to be qualified to be a teacher, which I'm told is not easy. But they weren't smart or wise enough to not have sex with a little fucking kid even though they see it on the news again and again and again. Because book smarts does not equal life smarts. It does not equal wisdom. And this is a society that plays stupid about that. They think that book smart villains should get paid lots of money and the wisest and the best should live with their parents. That is outrageous. Only monsters structure society that way. Monsters. Only monsters defend those cultural values. Monsters. Abominations. Peace. If you don't know I'm right, then you're dumb. If you don't know that I'm not racist, you were probably born yesterday or something, so to speak. Just in, I'm part black and part white, and every race, including black people and mulatto people, are shunning me. Okay. In a world where there's plenty of racists, and more often than not, they're not shunned. Shouldn't have to explain that. Now let's take the case of a big guy, big black guy, big Samoan, big white guy who's a football lineman on the varsity team at 17. Big guy. Now, they don't have the same muscle definition. Their masculinity isn't as defined and projected and as intense. It's unfocused. It's big. You see what I'm saying? They like having sex. Yeah, a little nerd likes having sex too. That's neither here nor there. Now, if they had sex with a female who's 25, who was big, like they are, clumsy like they are to some degree, maybe not the clumsiest, but clumsy relative to someone who's more on point with their strikes and movements, okay, maybe that's fair. Okay, especially if she's desperate, she can't find a date, you know, they might be a good match for each other. They probably don't look as good as a couple in public. He's like, why is that older female dating that little high school kid, right? Or a big little high school kid, right? Big young man. It's even called a young man, mind you. If that person then said, well, Christ said that he deserves a gorgeous 25-year-old, well, why don't I? I'm developed too. No, you don't. Sum total. Consider the sum total person that you're talking about. If you don't care. The word care is a play on words for see, the letter C, as in seeing things. You know, play on words for see, S-E-E, and R. See who they are. To see who somebody is. Not just say he's big, so give him an older woman. Or he looks mature, and and so, brother, yeah, you look mature. I was mature too. You should have sex with my wife or something. That's fucking retarded. You see what I'm saying? Fucking dumb. The Lord detests dishonest scales. That includes the dickheads who think that I should be shunned now and that thinks I should be shunned there. Or that somebody as wise and smart as I am when I was 17 should be forced to settle for some less than clueless, ditzy Babs Bunny, dumbass groupie cheerleader, dime a dozen, dumb fucking high school bitch. And notice when I say it this way, if they don't fuck up the recording like they usually do, because the mic is actually far from my mouth. I put it a little further away because I knew I was going to raise my voice. If they don't fuck the recording up, they're more likely to get it. Because when people engage you in a more serious manner, using cuss words, you're more likely to think about what they're saying. For example, someone's like, hey, excuse me, sir. Hey, what the fuck, man? Where are you going? Right? Which one gets your attention more? It's like that. If someone says, excuse me, it doesn't say sir. So directing it at you in a way that engages your mind is part of why I'm right to say it that way. That's why Christ is a character in the story. Said, you brood of vipers. How will you escape being condemned to hell? And things like that. You brood of evildoers. John the Baptist said things like that. Christ said things like that. Why? Because it engaged their minds more. And when people aren't paying fucking attention, it's helpful. Now, some of you say, well, no shit. Well, then tell these people to stop acting like bitches because I raised my... I can't hear you when you're yelling at me and act like a bitch. Stop the hate, man. Not cool, man. Your words are hateful, man. You don't need to yell at us. Bitch, shut the fuck up. You're shunning Christ Almighty and cheating me out of my right to lead? And you think you should correct me and not vice versa? And on top of that, I'm right about this topic? It's fucking sad, right? Fucking pathetic.